Good morning. Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Church. This is the message part of the service this morning that we'll be sharing with you this morning. And it comes from Numbers chapter 13, verses 25 up through chapter 14, verse 12. It's a story about the Israelites being brought to the promised land and then afraid to go in. So we hope you get something out of this morning. We hope it's meaningful to you, and we hope just be a help to you in your daily life. The Israelites, the land that the Israelites are living in, or it belongs to the Jews by divine right. God promised that land to them many years ago, before any the other groups were in there. They were promised even more land than they could occupy. They were told by God that every place they set their foot, that the land would be theirs. And of course, it's not nearly as big as it could have been today. It was promised to them by God through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, several times throughout their history, they rejected God and made God angry with them. So God turned his back to them, and they were conquered by different groups or different kingdoms. And they spent many years in exile, then serving penitence, if you will, as a nation for rejecting God. And eventually, each time that they were carried away into captivity, God restored them. This particular time, they were freed from Egypt, from the bondage and slavery and the miserable life that they were living in Egypt, and brought them to the borders of God's promised land. You know, many years ago, I used to be a scoutmaster. For 8 summers, I took young men, boys to Camp Lakota, to the Boy Scout camp in the summertime for a week. And there they would work on their advancement for their different ranks. Some of them needed to learn some basic scouting skills, cooking and fire building and things like that, first aid. Others needed to learn some additional skills to advance to the higher ranks, such as canoeing and archery and swimming, forestry and different things like that. There were over 100 of those individual badges that they could earn. And so many of them did that at summer camp. And we'd sit down and we'd plan with them some goals that they hoped to attain. And we had a rule that when you take a course, when you take one of those classes, you're there for the week. There's no quitting and dropping out and sitting around the campsite all week long. No, you're going to be there for the week when you take one of those courses. And of course, we had a minimum amount of things that they could sign up for as well. And it was kind of neat watching them grow and try to perform those acts and develop their skills. Was pretty good. Sometimes they would get there and there'd always be one that didn't want to participate. They signed up and they went there. They were eager when they got there, but something happened when they got there. They were afraid to even go to the class. They were afraid to try. And they back away and say, I'm not going down there. And of course, you'd have to talk to them and encourage them to go down and try. See, but before they went, they had themselves talked out of even going. They were afraid of failure, and they had themselves convinced that they weren't even going to try because they just knew that they were going to fail because they had never done it before. It was brand new to them, and they ended up trying, though, after a little coaxing and convincing. By a week's end, they discovered that it wasn't as bad as they thought, that they could do it. And it was kind of fun learning new things. And they received a great joy and reward for trying those things. Now, were they as good as the next person? Probably not. We all have different skill levels, but at least they tried. And at least they succeeded in learning the very basic things. You know, young people want to learn, or many people want to learn for that matter, that sometimes we're afraid of failure because we're afraid others will mock us and make fun of us. And so people sometimes just don't want to even try because they are afraid of that failure. It really becomes kind of frustrating when somebody has that kind of an attitude, doesn't it? Not only young men in the scouting program have those ideas, adults have those ideas and opinions as well. Not going to try it, afraid of failure, not going to even try it, not even going to discuss it. And so they've set themselves up for failure to begin with. Sometimes in an organization or just in your everyday life, someone will suggest something to you. Well, why not try this or why not try that? They'll say, no, it won't work. We tried that 30 years ago. It won't work. Well, guess what? Things change in 30 years. People's attitudes change. Technology changes. There's a new group of people. Just a lot of things can change in 30 years. You look at things differently. And so sometimes they just say, no, we're not going to try it. They just sit back and find fault and complain. And they complain that things are so bad, nothing's different. You know, but yet they won't try anything new. Sometimes we go to sing a new hymn or a new song. We don't know the melody, but instead of listening to the melody once, we'll listen to all the verses in the melody and not even try it. Something new, we can't try that, you know. But yet if you reach out and you try it, you might like it. You might just like it. Those are the kinds of attitudes that become kind of frustrating to people as we try to deal with those things. And we all go through those things. I don't mean to trivialize it, but we do all go through those thoughts and that process sometimes of rejecting anything new. And it can be quite frustrating to deal with. And if it's frustrating for us, just think of how frustrating it is to God after God performed many signs and wonders and miracles and set the Israelites free when he brought them out of Egypt, when he brought them away from that foreign land. In fact, he brought them out of Egypt by sending 10 plagues upon Egypt, upon the Egyptians. And at the end of those 10 plagues, Pharaoh then begged the Israelites to leave, to take the spoils of Egypt and get out of here. Go back to your homeland. And God led them for a short time through the desert, and he brought them up to the edge of the land that he had promised them, a land full of flowing, full of milk and honey and all kinds of riches. And the Israelites then set up a camp just a short distance from the borders of the land God promised them. And the Lord said to Moses, take and select 12 men, one from each tribe of Israel, and send them northward to reconnoiter the land, to survey the land and find out what the land is like. Is it rich and fertile? What kind of crops grow there? What kind of people live there? Are they big and strong? Are they small and weak? What are the cities like? How many people live there? Are there a lot of people or a few? Are the cities fortified? And bring back samples of the crops so we can see for ourselves. The 12 spies set out and crossed over into the promised land. And there they surveyed the land for 40 days. And they found out that the land was just what God had promised them. In fact, it was even more than they could have imagined. It was even better than they had envisioned. You know, God is like that. He gives us blessings, beyond all measure. He blesses us in ways that we could never dream of or imagine or even hope for. And sometimes we get scared and say, oh Lord, I don't want to try that. I want to do that, Lord. You may say there's a blessing in it, but I don't want to try it. It's scary. Never done it before. Well, after 40 days of exploring, the 12 spies returned to Moses, and they brought samples of the crops with them, and a cluster of grapes that was so big that it took 2 men to carry on a pole. They were just such luscious crops. And they made their reports then, each one of them, to Moses and Aaron and to all of the people, showing them the fruit that they brought back. And they said, there's good news and there's bad news. Well, when there's bad news, we know what follows bad news, don't we? The land is indeed a magnificent country, and it is indeed flowing with riches and milk and honey. There's so much food over there and so much wealth over there that we could live off the land without any problem at all. Think about that. When God makes you a promise, He doesn't give His people shabby little gifts or blessings, but He gives us much more than we're willing to give to Him. The spies continue to report saying, but. There's always that but in there, isn't there? Yeah. But says, well, it's good, it's just not good enough for me to put any effort into it. No matter how good it is, I'm not going to try. The spies said, well, the people, the Anakim giants are there among the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and other peoples. There are too many of them, and they're just too strong and powerful for us. We look like grasshoppers in their eyes, and they continued making all kinds of excuses as why they couldn't go and claim the land that God had promised to them. After all the miracles that they saw God perform and all the signs and wonders that God did in their midst, they still did not trust God. God became angry at their contempt of Him. These people left Egypt, but Egypt is still in them. They just couldn't get rid of the Egypt that was in them. After all God brought them through and supplied their what they needed to live on, the people still did not trust God. They couldn't believe that God would actually make a way for them to be victorious because there were overwhelming odds against them. But we know that God will make a way where there seems to be no way. We look at ways we trust in our own abilities and say it can't be done, but God will make a way. God said, I told you and I promised that I'll be with you no matter what you go through. No matter what you go through. All He does is ask us to trust Him and obey Him. The majority report of the spies discouraged the people from taking the land, and so they decided not to proceed into the land God promised them. Out of the 12 spies, only 2, Caleb and Joshua, gave a positive report, saying, the land God has given us is much more than we could have believed. Let us go immediately and possess the land, for we are able to conquer it, and we can take the land. We can do it. God has promised to be with us. We can do it. The people said, you got to be kidding. We're not going to go against people as strong as those people are, and as big as they are, and as numerous as they are. The people then decided that they wanted to select another leader and go back to Egypt. They just could not get Egypt out of themselves. God had a grand and glorious future for them planned, but they were content to live a life of misery. And they just wanted to keep on doing what they were doing, no matter the cost. Rather than to be free and trust God, they were willing to give up their freedom and return to their old miserable way of living. A life in bondage. But you know, as try as some of us want, we can't go back. You can't live in the past. The past does not exist. Doesn't exist. And no matter how much you want to try to make things like they were in the past, they're never the same. Never the same. And when you try to live in the past, you're always disappointed. Always disappointed. The people made a choice not to go into the land, and the choice affected their future. There was a correlation between the choice or the decisions they made and what happened to them in their future. And speaking of that, there is a correlation between what we are now and the decisions that we have made in our past. The decisions we've made in the past have brought us to the place where we are right now in our life, be it good or bad. Be it good or bad. Joshua and Caleb again tried to persuade the Israelites to go and to possess the land that God had given to them. But they refused, and they talked of stoning them just for talking about going and claiming the promise God made to them. We see some of that today, don't we? You got to watch what you say anymore, even in our country, because there's a small group of people that'll go about and try to hurt you if you say something that they don't like. It seems like our culture is becoming more and more like that. They don't like something, it's banned, or they'll hurt you or your family or business or whatever it is. That's fascism. You know, fascism existed even back in Moses' day and among God's chosen people. God took offense at the people's rebellion, asking Moses, how long will these people reject me? Will they never believe me, even after everything they've seen me do for them? With a plague, God said he would destroy those 10 spies who gave a negative report about God's gift and promise. And he also swore that not one of those adults who left Egypt, who left slavery in Egypt with me, will enter into the promised land. They will wander for 40 years in the wilderness. 1 year for each day that the spies explored the promised land. We can't be afraid to follow the Lord and claim his promises. God promised to those who love him a beautiful land, a land that is better than anything that you could dream of or imagine, a land that is not of this world. He asks us to take action to possess the land. He has put his church here in this community, and he has led us here saying, send out your spies here and learn about the land, learn about the community, and learn about the needs of the people and help them. Discover the resources that are available and then build my kingdom right here in Grover Hill. He has promised to be with us through any hardship that we must endure or go through. He's promised to be our comfort, our guide, and our strength through anything, any adverse thing that we go through, including any virus or illness that comes upon us. Yes, sometimes when it comes to the end of our time here on earth, we pass away, but the Lord has promised to be with us always. Just like God's people of old, God will give you the strength and empower you to do his will and to glorify his name every day of your life. And he only asks you to trust him and obey. And if you do, you will be blessed, so blessed, beyond anything that you could ever imagine. Well, the Lord said to Moses, I want you to bless my people like this. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. And he wants you to be blessed like that so that you will put his name on your heart, and he will bless you even more. In the name of Christ, amen. Have a great week.